Thanks for tuning in. You're watching ARIRANG News. I'm Na Hyun-kyung. Let's start with the deadliest Ebola outbreak on record. The death toll in West Africa continues to rise, and experts now acknowledge the situation has evolved into a crisis. The Korean government is also taking steps to make sure the virus stays outside its borders. Kwon Soa has the details.
Too fast to get under control. The Ebola outbreak in West Africa, already the deadliest in history, is spreading at a threatening speed. The latest reports show more than 50 people were infected with the virus from July 28th to the 30th in Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone. International efforts to contain the virus have accelerated in recent days. African leaders and the World Health Organization are working hand-in-hand on a response plan, while the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has announced it is sending at least 50 experts to the region in the next 30 days. In Korea, the government held an emergency meeting this Monday to discuss the growing health crisis. The health ministry announced that around 550 quarantine rooms will be prepared at 17 hospitals nationwide. Increased monitoring through thermal cameras will take place at Korea's airports, and passengers will be asked to fill out questionnaires about their health. The government has also advised people against traveling to the affected regions and said that the 170 or so Korean residents already there should be restricted from re-entering Korea if they show signs of the disease. The outbreak in West Africa has already killed at least 826 people and has a mortality rate of around 55%. Kwon Soa, ARIRANG News.
And on the other side of the globe, the death toll of China's earthquake continues to rise. Nearly 400 people are confirmed dead, with almost 2,000 injured after a powerful quake struck China's southern Yunnan province on Sunday afternoon local time, and the number of death toll continues to rise. Shin Se-min has more.
A massive rescue operation continues this Monday to find survivors of a strong quake that struck the densely populated city of Jiaotong in China a day earlier, toppling thousands of buildings and killing at least 380 people. So far, the number of injured stands over 1,800, but is likely to rise. The 6.1 magnitude earthquake had the deepest impact on Ludian, a county of some 449,000 people located in China's southwestern Jiaotong prefecture. An estimated 12,000 homes collapsed there. It is still unknown how many people could still be trapped under the debris. China's state-run Xinhua news agency says the earthquake was the strongest to hit the region in 14 years. A major rescue and relief operation is underway, with over 2,500 officers and soldiers dispatched to the worst-hit areas, carrying tents, food, and excavating tools. The Red Cross Society of China has sent quilts and tents, while Red Cross branches in Hong Kong and Macau are also sending relief supplies. Chinese authorities scaled up their disaster response on Monday to the highest national level. Chinese President Xi Jinping ordered authorities to make all-out efforts to save lives, while Premier Li Keqiang ordered them to provide food, clothes, and temporary housing for those without shelter. The quake struck in a largely agricultural area that is prone to earthquakes. In 1970, a magnitude 7.7 quake in Yunnan killed at least 15,000 people. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And back here in Korea, the main stock index, the Kospi, enjoyed its highest rally in 3 years last week. But the shifting stock prices are set to show that the nation's economy is becoming increasingly dependent on the IT and electronics sectors. ARIRANG's Yoo explains.
The benchmark Kospi broke the 2,080 mark last week for the first time in 3 years. But that's not good news for everybody, as data analyzed by corporate tracker CEO Score show that former heavyweights in the traditionally strong petrochemical, steel, and shipbuilding sectors are faring poorly. They used to be among the main building blocks of the Korean economy, but their market cap has slumped in the past 3 years. Market cap for IT companies, on the other hand, jumped by the biggest margins. Market superstars Samsung Electronics, which take up about 15% of overall market capitalization, rose by over 60% during the period. And the world's second biggest memory chip maker, SK Hynix, and Korea's leading online portal operator, Naver Corporation, both saw their market cap jump by over 100%. But the market value of POSCO, Korea's largest steel maker, shrank by nearly 27% during the period, while that of the world's biggest shipbuilder, Hyundai Heavy Industries, dwindled by over 60%. This has naturally led to a shift in the proportion of market cap by each industry. While the IT, automobile, petrochemicals, and shipbuilding and steel each took up a similar share of the Kospi market cap back in 2011, the market cap is now mainly led by the IT sector, which accounts for more than a quarter of the overall market. Companies in the petrochemical business saw market cap shrink by over half to 6%. 유리한 아리랑 뉴스.
And the Korean government is very much focused on revitalizing the economy, but many say Korea needs more fundamental and structural reforms to truly achieve that goal. Our Hwang Ji-hye spoke with Tom Byrne from Moody's. He's in charge of credit ratings for the major East Asian economies, including Korea.
The aggressive fiscal policies of Korea's new economic team will get consumers spending again and help build confidence in business over the short term, says Tom Byrne, a senior analyst at credit rating agency Moody's. He questions, however, whether they will bring about the fundamental changes needed to pull the economy out of its low-growth rut.
Over the long run, I would think that other aspects of the policy package would be more important. In particular, the new economic team's focus on economic innovation, such as reducing the debt level of public institutions. There's also regulatory reform, I think, is important over the long run, particularly, a regime that is predictable, less burdensome.
Regarding government measures to tax corporate cash reserves, Byrne said carrots are better than sticks when it comes to policies.
They know that they would get a higher return on a productive investment than they would just by sitting on cash balances.
While the new set of economic stimulus comes amid concerns that the Korean economy might follow in the footsteps of Japan's 20 years of lost growth, Byrne says Korea is not the only country suffering from the slow growth trap.
I think just about every economy is facing the prospects that growth will be slower now than it was before the global financial crisis.
About concerns that loosening home loan restrictions could worsen the nation's household debt problem, Byrne believes they aren't warranted for now. Hwang Ji-hye, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea's largest automotive group is gaining ground around the globe. Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors sold over 2 million vehicles combined during the second quarter of this year, good enough for a global market share of 9.1%. That's up 0.8 percentage points from the previous quarter and marks the second highest market share ever for the Korean automakers. The rise is being attributed to new models hitting the market like the Hyundai Sonata and Genesis and an increase in car sales in developing nations. Korea continues to be the nation with the largest income gap between men and women among advanced countries. Data released this Monday by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development shows Korea's gender income gap in 2012 stood at 37%, the highest among 11 countries whose figures were compiled. That means Korean women are paid only 63% of what males earn on average. By country, Japan came second with a gender wage gap of 27%, followed by the US, Canada, and the UK. The remaining 23 OECD members have yet to compile their figures. Korea has remained top of the list for 13 straight years from the year 2000, with the gap only narrowing by 3 percentage points over the cited period. And on a lighter note, the peak summer vacation season has begun here in Korea. And over the weekend, Incheon International Airport set a new record of visitors going in and out of the country. Son Jung-in has more.
It's early in the morning, but the departure gate at Incheon International Airport is already crowded with vacationers leaving the country for their summer holidays. And fortunately for them, strong winds and rain brought by this season's typhoons didn't stop flights operating to their normal schedule.
I saw people waiting in long lines at the check-in counter. I couldn't wait that long, so I used the unmanned check-in system.
With the summer holiday season in full swing, the number of passengers using Incheon International Airport reached an all-time daily high over the weekend. It recorded a total of 158,000 passengers on Sunday, breaking the previous record of 156,000 set the previous week. Compared to the record daily number of tourists set last year, the figure represents a 10,000 increase. Experts attribute this recent trend to the surge in low-cost carriers and also to the strong local currency. To deal with the growing number of outbound travelers, the airport has stationed 6 additional security checkpoints and opened its outer parking lot. As the summer peak season continues until mid-August, officials plan to open check-in counters half an hour earlier at 6:30 a.m.
We estimate the daily number of passengers from airlines data to better prepare and provide the best service, especially during peak hours.
Officials advise passport holders to process their documents through the unmanned screening system to make the immigration procedure easier and less time-consuming. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
And competition in the budget airline market is becoming fierce in Asia, not to mention Korea. So the Korean low-cost carriers are looking for new sources of profits. For example, going long haul. The first such airline to do so will most likely be Guinea. I had a chance to meet with one official there. Take a look. The low-cost subsidiary of Korean Air is gearing up to offer non-stop flights to Hawaii next year. Budget airlines going long distances is still a difficult nut to crack, but Jin Air's senior vice president of PR, Emily Cho, says it's all about putting passengers at ease over safety issues.
Of course, before we can convince them, we have to make sure that our services are ready to deal with the long haul as well. Since it's something new, they have to get used to it. For example, our pilots need 1,000 hours of previous experience to even apply to Jin Air, which is the same as Korean Air. So that shows how much we are dedicated to our safety record.
Jin Air opened its doors for business in 2008, and it took 2 years before it began operating in the black. All 5 low-cost carriers in Korea, as of last year, are making profits, testimony to the continuing boom of the LCC market in Korea, but there's a catch.
Southwest or JetBlue. In the US, the main reason why they were able to grow this big is that they were using the minor airports because of cheaper airport fees. But all the airlines are focused between Incheon Airport and Gimpo Airport in Seoul, for example. In China and Japan, because the population itself is big enough, there's a lot larger pool of those maintenance people or flight attendants.
In order to survive in this very tough market, Cho says Jin Air needs to make its name more known to potential customers overseas.
The Korean airlines have a very good reputation among the Chinese people, and we're hoping to kind of bond with them emotionally first, so they want to come to us first instead of us coming to them.
The competition in this market will only get worse, and successfully launching flights to Hawaii will be key in locking down sustainable growth for Jin Air. Now, the Korean government says it will publish a white paper on Korean women forced into sexual slavery by Japan before and during World War II. The white paper will update an interim report from back in 1992 on the issue and contain new study results and data collected to prove the sexual enslavement of Korean women by the Japanese military. The project is aimed to be completed by the end of next year. The white paper will be translated into various languages, including English, Chinese, and Japanese, to raise international awareness about Japan's wartime atrocities. In Israel, the nation declared a 7-hour ceasefire in most of the Gaza Strip to allow for Palestinians to inspect their homes and for humanitarian aid to come in. It warned, though, that it would fight back if attacked, especially as Hamas has said it has not agreed to the humanitarian pause. Also, not covered in the 7-hour ceasefire is the southern town of Rafah, where at least 10 people were killed in a shelling at another UN school sheltering Palestinian refugees. Much of Israel's ground troops are reported to have withdrawn to staging areas in Gaza after it struck nearly 70 targets on Sunday and destroyed the last of Hamas' cross-border tunnels. Gaza health officials said more than 50 Palestinians were killed on Sunday alone. In the meantime, Israel reportedly wiretapped the phone of America's top diplomat while he was trying to broker a peace deal between the Jewish state and Palestine. A German weekly Der Spiegel says Israeli intelligence agencies listened in on U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's conversations via satellite and used the information in the negotiations that broke down after 9 months in April this year. It added that at least one other spy service monitored Secretary Kerry's calls. No comment has been made so far from Washington or Jerusalem. And back here in the nation, the Korean government is aiming to invite more Chinese tourists into the country with a plan to ease visa entry requirements and establish medical centers for foreigners and resort complexes with casinos. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The number of Chinese people visiting Korea is on the rise, and the Korean government seems to want to keep it that way. Around 574,000 Chinese tourists visited Korea in June. That's almost half the total number of foreign tourists in the same period. The government says it will ease the visa application process and visa regulations for Chinese tourists by increasing the number of multiple entry visas so that more tourists can re-enter the country on a single visa. Authorities have also given the green light to the establishment of resort complexes with casinos and medical and education centers on the islands of Yeongjong-do and Songdo, which are near Incheon Airport, and Jeju Island in the south. The government is also allowing the establishment of for-profit hospitals and medical centers for foreigners in 8 free economic zones in Jeju Island in order to serve the rising number of medical tourists visiting the country. At least 10% of medical practitioners employed at the for-profit hospitals should have licenses from foreign countries, and the director of the hospital must be a foreign national. Similar deregulatory measures in the education and finance sectors will be laid out at a meeting later this month. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, we're in the middle of the dog days of summer right now, but for farmers, it's never too early to begin thinking about the harsh winter months and ways to protect their crops. To that end, a new type of heating system is catching on, and for good reason, as our Polly reports.
This is a 6,000 square meter vinyl greenhouse in Gyeonggi-do province that cultivates tomatoes. Heating it over past winter months would have cost the owner as much as $30,000 US. This past winter, it cost him just $3,000.
Now I only spend 1/10 of what I used to pay when I used the fuel-operated fan heater. It is a lot economical and profitable since it also reduces the harvest time by a month.
What's E's secret? He's using a newly developed heater called a carbon heating net that is buried underground in furrows between rows of tomato plants. It's placed 50 centimeters deep in the soil, and when connected to electricity, the ideal temperature for the roots of the plant is maintained. The system also promotes the growth of crops, increasing production while reducing the time needed for harvest. This carbon heating net is made with carbon and silicon in the form of a net and can adjust the temperature automatically to provide better insulation and save power. A local institute tested its efficiency, and experts view it as a promising development.
Because it raises the temperature of the roots, the growth period of crops in the early stages can be reduced by 2 weeks.
With high oil prices in the country, many farmers hope this low-energy device will take some of the sting out of Korea's harsh winter months. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
So the weather is scorching hot these days, and many would rather stay inside and enjoy the comforts of air conditioning. But that comfort could be coming with a price. Our Kim Hyun-bin explains why.
Lee Jae-ho paid a visit to the doctor a couple weeks ago because he had lost his appetite and began to sweat more than he normally did, even while in cool places.
I had headaches, a fever, and was coughing a lot. I was in a bad state.
To his surprise, the doctor told him he had pneumonia. Pneumonia typically occurs during winter months, but can also strike in the summer. Data from a local hospital shows that the number of patients diagnosed with the lung infection during the months of July and August is nearly 70% of midwinter figures. Doctors say that when summer heat reaches its peak, the immune system can weaken. The frequent use of air conditioning can also lead to respiratory problems due to a greater exposure to bacteria.
When it is humid, like in monsoon season, your lungs become weaker and cannot properly emit the germs that enter your body.
High temperatures can also raise the risk of strokes. The number of stroke patients surpassed the 1.9 million mark in both July and August last year, figures that are similar to those seen in winter. This is because the stress caused by prolonged exposure to heat can increase blood pressure, which is bad news for sufferers of diabetes and high blood pressure.
When you are exposed to the heat for a long period of time, you can get dehydrated, which can affect cerebral blood flow.
Doctors recommend drinking plenty of water and to cut back on coffee and alcohol, which may cause dehydration. Regular exercise and 7 to 8 hours sleep can also ensure that your immune system remains strong during the dog days of summer. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Now, Typhoon Nakuri has passed us by, but the remnants of the storm are still being felt. It looks like Gangwon-do and the eastern provinces will get rain throughout tomorrow, while Seoul is expected to clear up by tonight. Now, but we may be in for another round of showers soon. Another typhoon called Halong is expected to impact Okinawa, Japan by this weekend and will also be felt in the southern parts of the peninsula. Now, this storm system is a bit stronger than Typhoon Nakuri, so do keep that in mind if you have any plans in the areas where the storm is expected to hit. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out our afternoon at 29 this afternoon, while the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will both peak out at 28 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to 28 as well. Dokdo peaks to 27, while Mangkeungang tops out to 23. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. I'll be back with more updates in about 2 hours' time for early edition at 6.